Bun găsit tuturor, sunt Marius Constantinescu. Astăzi ediția limitată se întoarce la marile figuri ale literaturii contemporane, cu doi reprezentați cum nu se poate mai diferiți, romanciera americană Celeste Ng și jurnalistul britanic Paul Kenyon. Ambii sunt traduși și publicați în România de către Editura Litera.
Hi Celeste, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Perfectly. Hello.
Okay, good. I'm going to just, hold on, I'm going to just close the email window so that there's not many things, make you full screen. Okay.
Okay, great. Thanks so much for this opportunity.
No, thank you for taking the time. I'm really excited to get to talk with you.
Of course, great. So I think we're already recording, so whenever you're ready, we can start.
Okay, this is okay? Is the lighting
It's perfect,
okay?
the light is perfect, everything.
Okay. I have the headphones in just because then you don't hear yourself in the thing. It seems to work better. So
Okay, yeah.
is that okay?
Totally.
Okay. All right. I'm ready whenever you are.
Okay.
Născută dintr-un tată fizician și o mamă chimist, Celeste Ng a ales literatura, ficțiunea mai precis. Romanul său de debut din 2014, Tot ce nu ți-am spus, a obținut titlul de Cartea Anului din partea prestigiosului portal Amazon.com, iar New York Times a numit-o Notable Book of the Year. Celelalte romane care au urmat, Două la număr, Mici focuri pretutindeni și Inimile noastre rătăcite, au consolidat vocea lui Celeste Ng drept una dintre cele mai așteptate și mai apreciate creatoare de ficțiune din America anilor contemporani.
Celeste, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. It's a pleasure to have you as our guest and to spend a few minutes talking about your novels. They're all translated into Romanian as well. And I'm going to tell you, they're all bestsellers on the Romanian market.
Oh, that makes me so happy. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm going to start by talking about your debut novel, about Everything I Never Told You. It left an indelible mark on me. Is your first novel actually about all these things that we never say to each other?
I think that's exactly what it's about. I think it's about all of the things that we keep to ourselves. Sometimes they're things that we don't want to share, but sometimes they're things we keep a secret because we don't want to hurt other people. I mean, there's lots of reasons that people don't say things to other people. One of the cliches is "I love you." Right? We assume that the other person will know, but sometimes you need to hear that. And I think this story is about what happens in a family when they don't talk about those things.
Well, actually, everybody or almost everybody seems to praise honesty and openness and being sincere towards the other ones, especially the close ones. Yet, there are some things, good or bad, that are always hard to be said on a loud voice. Why do you think that happens?
I think it's because when you share something that's very personal to you, it makes you vulnerable. It means that you're opening up and it lets other people have an opportunity to hurt you. You have to trust them. You have to trust that they'll understand what you mean, and you have to trust that they will use that knowledge sort of to make your relationship better rather than to damage you or to take advantage of you. And I think with the people that we love the most, the risk is the highest, right? If you love someone like your parent or your sibling or your child, there's the most to lose in that relationship if it goes badly. I think that's part of why it's so hard to share these things.
You describe the struggles of a multiracial family in the United States, spread almost on 2 decades, from the middle 50s up to the, let's say, late 70s. Well, of course, some of the things described in the book changed dramatically. But among the profound things, do you think that these changes were equally significant as well?
So I hope that we've made progress in being able to talk about things or seeing a value in the openness and the honesty that you talk about. In the period of the book, those I think that wasn't the norm. There was still a lot of stigma, and there was the idea that you just bottle everything up and be tough and don't talk about it and get through it. And I think that hurt a lot of people. And now we have a slightly different culture. And I hope that means that some of those changes let us be more open with each other.
The novel took the world by storm, and especially for a debut novel, it was a huge success. Were you prepared for this kind of global exposure, for all these accolades?
No, not at all. I mean, when I wrote the novel, I really wasn't sure if anybody would ever want to read it. I wasn't sure that I could finish it. I'd never written a book before. And I didn't know if it would speak to anybody. I thought of it as a very small story about one family, a particular set of circumstances. And I wondered if it would mean anything to anybody else. So I'm so happy that so many readers have felt a kinship with the characters.
It took you almost 6 years. Why?
Partly I didn't know what I was doing. I'd never written a novel, and I knew what the story was from the beginning, but I didn't know how to tell it in a way that would convey the meaning. The story is about the family in their present day and then the family's past and how one influences the other. And I didn't know how to tell those two stories together. It took me a long time to experiment and figure out a way to do it.
Well, you have already 3 novels as we speak. How do you feel that your percourse from the first one up to the latest one shifted you, crafted you as an author?
I hope that I've learned more with each novel. I think in each book, I've started to look a little bit bigger. They all cover the same themes, I think, which is themes about identity, about family, especially parents and children, about feeling like you're an outsider or finding the place that you belong, finding people who understand you. I think those are the big themes. But in each one, I think I've tried to stretch myself a little bit. The first one is really about a family. The second one is about a town. And the third one is about sort of a larger society. So, with each book, I try to do something new for myself to kind of grow as a writer.
You somehow conveyed my next question, because I was going to ask you, since on one hand, secrets seem to be a very important thing for you as an author in order to explore them through your novels. On the other hand, we have this kind of family relationships, especially parents and children. And I was going to ask you, what kind of creative fuel, if I may say that, do they represent, both the family relationships and the secrets?
I think they're always about us wanting to understand other people. We can't read each other's minds, as I always say to my child. I would say, you have to tell me what you're thinking or what you want, because I don't know it. I can't read your mind. And that's that interest in other people, that desire to know other people and really understand what they're thinking, what they've been through, what they want, what they need. I think that's so fundamental. For me, that's what links those things together. In the family, you grow up with those people if you're lucky, but there's still so many things about them you don't know. And that paradox is fascinating. You can spend your whole life with your sibling or your parent or even your child, and yet there's so many things about them that you may never know. And it's this endless trove of secrets that you kind of you hope they'll share with you, and that you sometimes want to share with them.
On the other hand, probably this family relationship, let's say, topic that seems to cross through the whole of your body of work makes the books so relatable to in each and every corner of the world, because there's not a localized or a specific drama or story. Families seem to be everywhere, more and more the same.
Yeah, the more places that I go, the more people that I meet, the more I find out that there are these huge similarities in families. Everybody has a different story, but at the heart, we're always trying to understand, how did I come from these people? Or I came from these people, how can I follow in their footsteps? There's always that that sense of wanting to understand how you relate to your family, to where you come from. And I think that's universal.
How do you write? Do you revise a lot? Do you come back to your own writings? Do you hesitate? When do you know you have the best version that you can possibly deliver?
I revise a lot. For me, it's a slow process. I write sort of by instinct. I follow the characters, and I try to get to know them as if you're getting to know a person. You know, who are you? What are you interested in? Where did you grow up? Do you like your brother? Oh, you don't like your brother. Why don't you like your brother? What happened? You know, that's how I find the story. And then I have to let it sit for a while, often several months. And then I come back to it with sort of a fresh perspective. And I look at it, and then I try to revise the story so that it's as clear and as meaningful and sort of as beautiful as I can make it. And then I revise it again, and I revise it again. So that's why it took so long. I think I know when I have the final version, when it's as close to what I have in my mind as it can be on the page. When I read it, and I think this is, I've said in my mind, you know, I've said to myself what it was that I realized what I wanted to say. That's sort of when I know that it's time to let the story go.
Well, one question that I never get bored of asking writers, and there's been quite a few in the last years, is: do you allow yourself to be surprised by your own writings, by your own turn of stories? Because I know you are the author of the story, so you're supposed to know everything from the beginning up to the end. But still, is there this surprise element?
There is always a surprise element for me. In fact, if I'm not surprised, the story does not feel alive to me. And usually that means I either don't know enough, I need to know more so that I can be surprised, or else the story is not working and I have to put it away. I know the story, but I don't always know how we get there. It's sort of like saying, I know that I'm going on a trip. I'm going from here to New York City, but I don't know what route I'll take to get there. You know, I think I'm going to go this way, but suddenly this road looks very interesting. I'm going to go down it, and I find something new on my way to New York. That's sort of how the writing process is for me. I need to explore in order to have the story feel living.
Well, exploring on this family topic, maybe a little bit more, one would say that through fiction, one tries to come to terms with her or his own family past. Is this your case as well?
I think that's true, but not autobiographically. I think part of my family story, I'm lucky that I love my family and we get along and we have a good relationship, but we're very different. My family are mostly scientists. My father was a physicist.
Absolutely,
my mother
yes.
is a chemist. My sister is an engineer, and I'm a writer, and they like books and I like science, but we approach the world differently. And so I think being a little on the outside of just seeing my family both from inside and also from outside, that's one of the themes that comes through in my book of what does it mean when you don't see eye to eye with your family. You love them, you respect them, you get along, hopefully. But what is it like if, you know, you don't see the world in the same way they do? How do you make peace with that? And how do you find people who see the world in the same way that you do?
I was going to point this out. Both your parents are refined scientists. Your father a physicist, your mother a chemist. Did you inherit some of their keenness towards the exact sciences?
I think I did, in at least in a very fundamental way. I always want to know how things work. I think that's what makes a scientist a scientist. They're trying to understand the universe, and they are doing it maybe in the laboratory, maybe on the atomic level. And I am thinking about it a lot in the people level, right? Where I'm like, how did you come to be this way? What made you do that thing? So I'm also trying to figure out how the world works. I think we're just coming at it from different angles.
Your novels were or are in the process of being screen adapted. How do you perceive this new level, this new life that the story gets from the screen adaptation?
It's really fun. I enjoy it. I know some writers are not always excited about it. For me, it's a chance for the story to find a new audience, and it's also a chance for the story to grow and adapt and take on a new form. I think the best TV adaptations or film adaptations are ones where it's not a faithful recreation moment by moment of the book, because the film it's a different medium. It's like a different language. It's really being translated. And just as if you translate something into a different language, you have to say it differently, right? Maybe you tell the story differently. The grammar is different. It's the same in film. And part of the fun, I think, is getting to see how someone else spins your story a little bit. I use the example of it's like listening to a cover song. You want to hear the same melody, something that's familiar, the same words, but you do want to hear how the new musician puts their own mark on the story. And for me, that's the joy of the adaptation, is getting to see how other people can add to the story and turn it into something slightly new.
Well, this is a spontaneous curiosity. When writing, do you actually visualize parts of the story as being part of a series or of a movie? Do you see the heroes, the characters, having the traits of a certain actor, of a certain public figure?
I don't. I know other writers do sometimes. For me, I think the writing is very much from the inside out. So I'm not watching them. I'm trying to imagine myself in their mind, in their body. What does it feel like to be this character in this scene? And so when it comes time to think about, casting or how do we picture this person, it's actually quite hard for me, because I'm used to seeing them from the inside, and to think about what do they, what actor would be good for this character. For me, that's actually a challenge.
Are you actually the kind of author that gets immediately and intensively drawn into her own writing? I mean, you live their life. You are there in their stories, in their situations, in their context. Getting out of there sometimes can prove really difficult for you.
Yeah, when I'm writing, I'm very immersed, and one part of my brain is always thinking about the story. So even if I'm cooking dinner or I'm, going on an errand, there's a part of my brain that's always thinking about that. And when I finish the book, I have to give myself a little bit of a break to not think about the next book right away. Maybe I'm not even reading. I need some time to kind of leave the other story and kind of say goodbye and detach my brain from all those characters.
After you have ended a book, do you revisit it? Do you read certain chapters, certain passages, and think, I could have done better here?
I do. Maybe I shouldn't admit that. I should say, no, it's done.
It's done, yes.
I think for me, I look back on it, and it's a little bit like looking at the work that you did when you were younger, when you were a young person or a teenager or even a child. I try to appreciate it for what it is, but I also recognize that hopefully I've grown, and I think that's a good thing. Now I go, oh, I would do that differently. Maybe I would write that sentence differently, but I leave it as it is, because it's a reminder that's who I was then. That's the story that I was writing then and the writer that I was. And now I'm a different person. And so, of course, I would make changes, but I try not to.
Celeste, you are an accomplished and worldwide recognized author today, but do you still have writers that influence you, that mark you, that you look up to?
Oh, absolutely. There are certain classic authors that I turn to. I keep their books on the bookshelf and I reread them because I learn so much and I enjoy them as a reader. But I'm constantly looking sort of at up to those writers to think, how did you do that? How can I learn to do that? And I'm really inspired by my peers, by other writers who are writing their books now and publishing. I try to read as much sort of new fiction, from the past few years as I can to stay present in what's happening now, because people are doing really amazing work. And I learn so much from seeing what other authors are doing. They inspire me a lot.
What do you actually admire the most in a writer, whether from the new generation or from the past?
I really love language, and so I think an author really can tell me almost any story as long as the language and the telling are beautiful and careful, and you know, I can tell that they've made the sentences work. I write by ear, kind of. It has to sound right in my brain, and so when I'm reading, I'm listening to the words. For me, that's one of the first things. It's like watching a really talented musician, to see just the things they can do with their instrument. I don't care what the song is. I'll listen to them play whatever they want to play.
So actually, it's the music of the phrase, the music of the language that you admire the most, that you look up for in a writing, whether new or classic, let's say.
Yeah. I think that's the first thing for me. I want a good story. I love, you know, the story that will keep you turning pages and keep you up late at night. But it also needs that that music, as you put it, for me to be drawn in.
Celeste, we are living troubled times. We have had a pandemic. We still have, unfortunately, a war ongoing. How do you think that all these things will put their mark on today's fiction?
I've been wondering that. I'm curious to see how the pandemic shows up directly or indirectly in fiction and in poetry. And the same with the war. I think we are all processing what's happening. Sometimes it takes time for that to work its way into the art because we have to think about it. I wonder if it will make us reevaluate which things are really important to us. I know for me, during the pandemic, I started to realize how important it was to be connected to other people, how much I missed my community. You know, the friends and family, of course, but even just you go outside and you are in your town and you see people. To go outside during the pandemic and see no one was really terrifying. And it made me recognize how much I value community and sort of sharing things with other people. I don't know what, you know, other people will take from it or what we'll take from the war, but I wonder if those big events will lead to fiction where people are really saying this, you know, this, whatever it is, this is the thing that we need to preserve.
Do you think that also the public's, the audience's expectations changed in the frame of this social global events that we have experienced or still experiencing?
I think so. I think there's no way that it could not, right? I know some people, they want to escape from the world that they have, and so they want a book that is nothing like it, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And some people, they want to read about what's happening or about times that are similar because you want to know that you're not the only one, right? You want a sense like we've gone through something like this before, we can survive it. But I also wonder if both of those groups, if they have to recognize now that we are all interconnected. You know, there is a war happening right now and it's over there, but it affects us, not just in a practical way, but in an emotional and a social way. We are all part of the same world, the same with the pandemic. I wonder if the audience's sense of who their community is, if that has changed in starting to think of us as a global society rather than just, well, that's some other country, not me. I hope so.
Celeste, it's been such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me on. Thank you for all of your wonderful questions.
Când vine vorba de jurnalism în zone de conflict, numele lui Paul Kenyon este o referință greu de ignorat. Recompensat cu un premiu BAFTA și cu o carieră impresionantă la BBC, Paul Kenyon este și autorul cărții Copiii nopții, povestea stranie și eroică a României moderne. Asta pentru că este un fin cunoscător al realităților românești încă din anii 90, perioadă în care o cunoaște aici pe Flavia Kenyon, cea care îi devine soție și care astăzi este primul avocat pledant din Marea Britanie vorbitor de limbă română.
So, Paul Kenyon, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today about one book of yours that really stirs interest and passions, I would say, in Romania, in Britain as well, because it concerns us Romanians. We are talking about The Children of the Night, the strange and epic story of modern Romania. My first question is, what makes it strange? And what makes it epic?
Well, that's a very good question. I think strange because it's supposed to evoke something of that the sort of old literature around Bram Stoker and the Gothic movement of that time. And even though I know a lot of Romanians aren't particularly comfortable with mentions of Vlad Dracula, the point is that if it goes in that direction, if it's sort of encased in that kind of packaging, that verbal packaging, if you like, to call it strange, near when people see that on the front of the book, I think that's good. So it gives it that Gothic feeling anyway. So strange in that sense, don't worry, no insult to Romanians, but also strange is actually it's quite a tempting thing for readers to try and engage with. Because they think if you said, the very neutral, straightforward story of Romania, obviously nobody's going to be interested, but it is strange from where I'm sitting in Western Europe. So strange because of that, heroic, epic, because I think people need to understand that Romania is so multi-dimensional. They've got to understand, they can't just think that Romania begins with Ceausescu. They have to understand all those extraordinary years during Antonescu, further back during Queen Marie, all the high society of Romania during the sort of Belle Epoque era. And I want people to understand and soak up the richness of the country. So, and also heroic, because of course, as you know, Romania on that very important fault line between East and West, between Russia and Europe, and always has these sort of repeating historical issues with which side to choose in a great conflict. Who does it go with, Germany or Russia? Who does it go with, the old Ottoman Empire, or does it go with the West? It's always had these problems. So problems which I obviously, as an author and a journalist, think are fantastically exciting to dig into and to explain to people who know nothing about Romania.
As a matter of fact, the book retraces the Romanian country's history, starting with Vlad Dracula, Vlad the Impaler, and going up to the 1989 revolution. Why this beginning and why this end?
Well, again, that's a really good question. I had to think long and hard about starting the book with Vlad Tepes. And the reason I did it is because if you speak to people, I'm afraid, outside Romania about the history of the country, a lot of them, one of the only recognizable names is Vlad Tepes. They will have heard of Ceausescu, but I didn't want to start with him for all the reasons we can imagine. So I think in order to attract a new audience so that people will understand the greater history of Romania, you need to start with Vlad Tepes. You need to tell the story of why actually he's a national hero to some people in Romania and what some of his politics were, and actually how important he was to the future of Christian Europe at the time. You know, people just think he's this bogeyman that is something to do with Bram Stoker, and it's all been exaggerated over time. But actually, to understand he was a real living person and the historical context within which he was fighting against the Ottoman Empire, I think all that is really important. Why did I finish with Ceausescu? Well, there's a couple of very brief answers to that. I finished in 1989 because it was a natural pause, and I thought the change thereafter is so seismic with Romania, it requires another book. So I've left my way open to writing another book about Romania.
That's a smart move. Yes, congratulations on that.
And also, and you know, I'm afraid, and you will understand this as well as a writer and a journalist, it is in some ways, my job is to write about dead people. I mean, it is easier to write about dead people who won't sue, and this is particularly important when writing about Romania. Everybody who comes into the frame immediately after Ceausescu, obviously many of them are still alive, including Iliescu. I'd love to dig into all that. I'm not frightened about him. There are certain politicians who came after him who I'd like to really dig into and tell the truth about, and I would be wrapped up in lawsuits for the rest of my life.
You first came to Romania in 1994. Thinking about what you've seen and experienced back then and the way Romania presents and represents itself today, would you say the journey was rather short or long?
What, my journey or Romania's journey?
Probably Romania's journey in the first place. Then if it has common points with your particular journey, then the more the better.
Well, you know, I think that Romania's journey has been actually exceptionally fast. It won't feel like that way in Romania. But if you think of a situation where obviously during Ceausescu, you don't have anybody who knows how to operate democratic institutions. You don't have anybody who understands how to run elections or how to have a sort of civic society. Civic society is so important to the West. And if you start from, I'm afraid to say, this sounds awful, but start pretty much from zero in that realm. And then, you know, what are we talking? 40 years later, you're in a position, well, fewer. That's how bad my maths is. What are we, 1989, 1990? So, you know, 30 years later, you have a position where you are in the European Union and that you have one of the most rapidly expanding economies in Europe. And there's all these sort of successes around. And I think when I talk to my Romanian friends, they'll sort of say, oh my gosh, it's taken so long. I don't think it has. I remember speaking to my father-in-law in about 1996, something like that, and him saying, how long do you think we can be in the European Union? And I remember thinking, you're kidding me. This isn't going to happen anytime soon. This is like 30, 40, 50 years away. It wasn't actually that long after that. And we know how much had to get in place in order to meet the requirements of the European Union. So all I would say is that the journey has been long, but it's actually been quite quickly covered in comparison with many other states that haven't been able to do that well at all since having totalitarian dictatorships. So, and very briefly on my own story, my own story has been a sort of, I have a love affair with Romania, which many Romanians find intriguing and a little bit odd and maybe even crazy. But every time I come there, I feel so inspired. I want to get my notebook out and start writing. I want to go into the mountains and just observe kind of peace and tranquility. And I want to be in the old town in Bucharest and go to the bars and admire and look at the architecture. When I was there last time, I spent a lot of time just walking along the roads, pointing out different aspects of the architecture, saying that's sort of neo-French architecture, that's got an Ottoman influence. That, I mean, there's such an eclectic mix of architecture that I can just get excited spending days walking alone by myself in Bucharest. So I would say my rather than my own story or journey being long, it's been intense and colourful when it comes to Romania.
Well, thank you so much for your perspective. It's certainly a refreshing one, not to mention so useful to ourselves, because living here, confronting each day with Romanian realities, good or bad, probably we tend to forget to exactly what you were mentioning, to look around. And when I'm saying look around, I really mean that. Look around and feeling the city and trying to observe everything with a more distant and analytical eye. Why not? So you're obviously, Paul, fascinated with Romania and with Romanian history, the history of this land, actually, because we are talking about more Romanian countries, not only Romania, the modern Romania. It is a public fact that you are married to a Romanian lady. Well, I was wondering, had it not been this particular detail in your private life, do you think you would have still retained this fascination?
Yeah, I've thought about that quite a bit. And I've got to be honest and say probably not. If you think about it, when I came in '94, I fell in love with this woman, but I fell in love with the country at the same time. And the two became kind of conflated in my mind. So they both represent each other. So I suspect I wouldn't have been so completely in love with the country. I'd have been intrigued. I'm not sure I would have been able to have it sustained for such a long time that I would write a book about it. But it's interesting, isn't it? When I went, I mean, that personal involvement, that meshing of my now personal history and Romanian history, what it means is that when I looked back into what was happening in Romania between the wars, I remember meeting my wife, Flavia, her grandmother, and speaking about her experience in Ploiești, and first of all being bombed by the Americans because of the oil, and then being attacked by the Germans. So all that kind of stuff, it was, as I researched it more, and it all came together in my head, to have a personal stake, if you like, in that was really important, because to be able to put individuals who I've met and know well and are part of my extended family, to be able to put them in moments in history, to me, that was my motivating factor really for writing the book.
Does this love relationship with Romania also concedes a moment of resentment, even hate? Why not?
What is there any? Have I got any hate for Romania?
Yes, something you particularly dislike, you profoundly dislike from the bottom of your heart, the way you love Romania, the way you hate Romania.
Oh, well, I mean, my goodness, that's quite a delicate question, isn't it? So I can't, things that I think that I have to be really careful here about making general points, but there is something that sometimes I dislike and sometimes I love. So I select I'll tell you what it is. And it is something that's to do with the Latin temperament. Mm-hmm. And it is the fact, obviously, that I come from a very different background, so that the English spend a lot of time never quite making the point, or making it so subtly in arguments. Nobody's quite sure where they stand. So it's all very polite.
Yes, very diplomatic, totally, yes.
Yeah, my wife would say it's exhausting. We don't know where anybody stands on anything. Everybody's sort of covering up what their true feelings are. So having my wife and her family who are more Latin, who can get cross very quickly, and I've met a lot of Romanians who are like that. Sometimes, obviously, if they have a differing point of view to mine, it's incredibly exasperating and infuriating. If they're on my side, I'm very happy with it. But that Latin temperament, I suppose, and also I suppose that over the years, particularly maybe in some of the older population of Romania, a slight pessimism about events. And I think that has, and if I'm allowed to say this, I suspect that is something that's come out of years of totalitarianism under Ceausescu. And I think it becomes something which really has infected an entire or several generations in Romania, and particularly the elder generation who got the brunt of it during their better years. It's very difficult to throw that off. And it's funny, when I talk to you excitedly about Romania, I think some young people, like you, of course, can find themselves getting excited about your own history. But I think much beyond 55, 60 people, it's more difficult. There's a pessimism, which I find a little bit disturbing.
There has been some years ago a touristic tag saying Romania simply surprising. It may have had a certain charm for the foreign visitors, but for my part, I find it obnoxious because it underlines a certain inconsistency of the people that has the potential of becoming a label, a national label. Do you have your own label, Romania related?
I sometimes think I should come and work for your tourism board, because I think I'd be better at selling Romania. I mean, seriously, I can't remember some of the adverts I've seen recently, but I always think, gosh, they undersell it. There's quite a lot about come on a cycling holiday, go and see the mountains type of thing. I mean, revisit the country's history. Now, I'm not going to be able to come up with a caption right now off the top of my head.
Yes.
But I would think that, in a way you have to capitalize on the fact that Romania, that people will come to Romania to see where, I'm afraid, the prisons. They will come to see what was going on under communism. They will come to see possibly, some of the landmarks that Antonescu would have been around, and Queen Marie and the Arc de Triomphe, all that, some of which means conflict or war. I don't think they should shy away from it. I think that these things need to be celebrated.
Most reviews talk about the rhythm and the intricate narrative that define your book, like a true policier. Is real history the best fiction ever?
Yeah, I mean, I write historical narrative, and so I try to make it sound like a story. And these are stories. And you will know as well that as journalists and writers, what we do is we find exceptional individuals, and it's really important that you make them a full character. So you understand the good and the bad in people. So you come to somebody like Codreanu or Antonescu, you know, historians will sort of write them off and just explain what they did that was not great for Romania. But I think that to understand personally, something like Codreanu and his love of tomato farming and his love of yoga, all these, and his love of communal living, all these points, when you put them all in there and you can make a fully rounded character, I think that draws people in. So it's not, I know what you mean, it can sound, a lot of people have said, my God, you read it, it sounds like a work of fiction. But that is Romania's history for you, that it is so outlandish that it sounds like fiction.
Well, as someone with a broad view of Romania, both from the inside as from the outside, Paul, what do you think is one of the biggest prejudice about it?
I think it's a shame, isn't it? There's still a lot of prejudice. There still is in the UK. I hear people speaking Romanian in cafes or on the street, and much to my wife's embarrassment, I go over to them and I say, where are you from? And they look appalled that somebody's asked them, and then they whisper very apologetically from Romania. And why whisper? I mean, this should be celebrated. I think people need to be really bold and say, I'm from Romania. I mean, my God, it's one of the most exciting countries in Europe. But it is a shame, isn't it? There are some ignorant British people as well, and in America, who think of those who will just think Ceausescu, orphans, Dracula. And I hope that this book, the intention really was to say, please, just, if you get drawn in by Dracula, which was the hook to pull them in at the beginning of the book, once you're in it, you shouldn't be able to put it down, because there is so much more to the country. Some of it terribly bad,
yes,
but some of it very exciting and progressive.
Exactly, and characters like Queen Mary that you describe, and probably we should all be prouder of having such a character in our recent history, in our modern history, a character that Europe and the whole world should be more acquainted with.
Yeah, I think so. I agree with that. I really enjoyed writing about her, and not just because she was British. I mean, it gives the British audience another reason to draw themselves into the book. But, you know, to be related to Queen Victoria, and then to go to Romania, not speaking the language, not knowing anything about the culture in the very early days of the country, and be in a position where, as you will know, she turned throughout her life, when she found her calling, when she went to treat troops in the trenches during the First World War and the Second Balkan War, when she's involved with that, she has an epiphany and says, yeah, she was no longer British. She felt as though she'd turned a corner. Her soul was Romanian. What an extraordinary story of a girl who goes there at 17 or 18 years old and ends up being something of a heroine for the country, but also in herself feels as though she's more Romanian than she is British. She converted. Her soul changed. It's an amazing thing.
Paul Kenyon, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Doamnelor, domnilor, ediția limitată de astăzi se închide aici. Sunt Marius Constantinescu, trăiți nelimitat!